Hello, my name is John Glasgow, the Programs and Partnerships Manager for Rural Schools Collaborative. We are a national nonprofit organization in the United States that believes building sustainable rural communities comes through a keen focus on place teachers and philanthropy. I actually want to start by extending my fullest thanks and gratitude to the Korean Educational Development Institute for reaching out and inviting the Rural Schools Collaborative to speak on today's international panel. Just as my organization's name says, collaboration is incredibly important for us, and I personally believe it's a timeless good quality for us to foster whenever possible. And so, as honored as I am to speak about the work of RSC and our partners, I want to emphasize that we are but one relatively young effort working on an issue in the United States that transcends our small but mighty team of 5 staff in rural Illinois. So, for today's conversation, I will share a little bit about myself, Rural Schools Collaborative, and why we come to this work. Next, I'll talk about the programming RSC has to support innovative and transformative curriculum in rural places generally. But then last, I'll dive into 5 case studies from our partners all around the US that really show how the mission, vision, and programs I shared today are used in the field to enhance student learning and achievement, to inspire teachers, and generally to strengthen rural schools and communities. So beginning then with a little bit of background history and context, I grew up in a small town here in Western Illinois. And for those of us from a rural place, we know instinctively how important our local school district is to the current life and the future health of our area. To put it one way, when the school does well, so does the town. Now, it's also a basic truth that a school is only as strong and as capable as its teachers are. And for far too long, a shrinking number of educators in the United States have had to do ever more with even less. This crisis is acutely felt in our rural areas. So in response to this, my organization was founded in 2015 on the belief that the strength of rural communities is directly tied to the vibrancy of the local school district, and that the vibrancy of our local school district is directly linked to the ability of our rural educators themselves to act as visionary community leaders. So, partners from around the United States came together to elevate the good work of rural teachers, in the belief that doing so would reshape the narrative around rural education and, importantly, attract support for local schools. As our founding partners came together to create this organization, they identified 4 key trends that they felt were plaguing public education in rural America. First is that schools are decontextualized. So even though schools are essential to the life of rural communities, often the curriculum in the classroom and the methods for teaching are disconnected from the school's place. Place meaning the towns and peoples that comprise the school. 2, the number of rural teachers is declining. This is happening for a number of factors like decreasing funding and pay, decreasing interest in teaching, and difficulties retaining teachers, to say a few. And it's getting harder to find, train, and keep quality teachers in rural places. Number 3 here is funding levels for rural schools are challenging. Now this is directly related to the second trend here as well. Rural schools often sit at the intersection of being both underfunded and residing in a high poverty area. So financial and all manners of resources are severely limited. And lastly, number 4, teachers are professionally isolated. Many times teachers themselves do not feel connected to each other in a professional or collaborative way. And this directly contributes to the crisis of teacher quality, recruitment, and retention that I mentioned. Now, overall, the impact of these 4 trends on students is that they rarely have autonomy to choose their own educational pathways and feel disengaged from the classroom content and the larger community. Relatedly, they do not see the opportunities and assets of the homes that they grow up in. So all of this means that rural youth are both less prepared to thrive in a 21st century economy, and they're more likely to leave their home communities, which contributes back to the continued decline of rural places and the worsening of those 4 trends that I just mentioned. However, we like to underscore that much hope remains, and rural teachers and schools are constantly inventing and reinventing innovative approaches to education that provide the very best for our students. So our partners in the programs we have to support them are directly built on that hope. The goal for this shared work, I'd like to share a little bit here. I know it's a big chunk of text on a slide, but I want to read through it with you. It's that every rural community has well-resourced schools with empowered and talented teachers and leaders who develop agency in young people to see a positive future in their community. Through local, regional, and national collaboration, high quality and effective experiences from partners can be shared and scaled to benefit everyone in their own unique context. So that all sounds good. How exactly do we do that? So Rural Schools Collaborative and our partners target those 4 trends I just mentioned through our shared methods and programming. How these methods actually operate on the ground looks different for each partner and each region, and I'll share some of those specific cases in the next section. But generally speaking, our shared work falls into 3 broad categories. Each of them are aimed at uplifting and strengthening teachers in particular, because an inspired and energized teacher will unlock a student's potential to be also inspired, energized, and even engaged. So the first category of work is changing the narrative around rural education. As I hinted at earlier, there is a pervasive dominant narrative that says rural schools, rural places, and rural people are constantly in a deficit, that they're lacking something, that they're devoid of any meaningful assets or opportunities. And while there are undoubtedly challenges and issues in rural places, I don't want to hide that, the impact of this constant stream of negativity, though, is that fewer and fewer people view rural places as a viable option to have a meaningful or successful life. In turn, what this does is that limits the ability of teachers and schools to provide for their students and communities, since fewer people want to become teachers and fewer students see the value of contributing to their community. So instead, we seek to change the narrative around rural education by highlighting acts of good, successful innovation and highlighting the distinct opportunities and assets each community has, and underscoring how important teachers are in particular. Now, we do this bucket of work through intentional storytelling about teachers, schools, and places, and then broadcasting those stories regionally and nationally through social media and some traditional communication platforms. And we also do this storytelling through speaking to others at events like this, sharing with you all about the power of rural places. Now, a second category of work is emphasizing the importance of place. And this is really just as important as sharing about the benefits of rural schools, is emphasizing how important place is. Now, place, as I've been using it in this presentation, means a number of different things. For me, it refers specifically to the intersection of rural people, meaning society or culture, the local economy, and the natural environment. Now, as I said before, a modern standardized school curriculum is hardly contextualized to a particular place, and rarely ever is it a rural place. And so rural students struggle to connect their lived experiences and understandings to what they're learning. And at the same time, once they graduate, rural students have equal difficulty connecting what they did learn back to sustaining their homes. So we work to emphasize the power and importance of place in 2 distinct ways. First is through contextualization, or strengthening the connection of a local school to its place. Again, this type of work also comes in a number of forms, but most prevalent is making sure that school projects, that grant proposals, and stories or news reporting that we do reflect the unique needs and assets of an individual place. A second understanding of place is through classroom curriculum, and in particular, place-based education. Place-based education or place-based learning has many different definitions as well, and for this, we typically refer to our partners at the Teton Science Schools in Jackson, Wyoming. Together, we understand place-based education as an approach that connects learners, students, and communities to increase student engagement, boost learning outcomes, and promote understanding of the world around us. Now, at its foundation, place-based learning is student-centered and student-driven. And even more, Teton Science Schools further refine place-based practices into 6 core principles of learner-centered, inquiry-based, design thinking, community as classroom, interdisciplinary approach, and local to global context. A place-based curriculum will allow students to take leadership in their own education, to study topics in a way that suits their own individual needs and interests, and honestly liberates both teachers and students from the resource and curriculum barriers imposed by a traditional form of education. Now, a third category of our work is empowering rural educators. So we empower rural teachers to become fully visionary leaders in the classroom and the community. Restating a point I made earlier, a rural teacher who sees themselves as a community leader with the power to inspire students and families alike will be more empowered to act on their belief and enable the school to function as a central hub for the whole community. Now, this is actually not a new role for teachers. Most of us can point to at least one educator in our lives who was immensely influential in our own growth and development. Because educators have this active hand in fostering the growth of entire communities, their work has long been central to the overall health and vitality of that place. The work of empowering teachers, therefore, is really foundational to Rural Schools Collaborative and is really found in everything we do, including, first of all, storytelling and network building. Now, this segment of our work is all about showing gratitude to teachers, building up prestige around them and the profession, and highlighting the impact of teachers in rural places. We also like to cultivate collaboration among teachers with a Facebook group. We also have an advisory council of young teachers, and we have a newer program called Rural Educators Across Borders, where rural teachers from around the world can come together and share their experiences and ideas for innovation in the classroom. Now, a second way that we empower rural educators is we support pathways into rural education. With our partners, we've articulated a model of recruitment, preparation, and retention for rural teachers that emphasizes the assets and opportunities perspective in rural areas and embraces place-based methodology. Third, we provide some opportunities to fund the work of rural teachers as well. Whenever possible, we like to do that. So since our founding, we have provided small grants directly to teachers to create and implement a place-based classroom project of their own design. Now, seeing how we work generally, for this final section, I'd like to dive into 5 examples from our partner regions that show what this type of work looks like on the ground. And I picked these 5 to show a diversity of regions, diversity of populations, school types, and interpretations of the 3 concepts that I just shared. So the first school I'd like to talk about today is called the Koshkonong Trail School in Cambridge, Wisconsin. Koshkonong Trail School, or KTS, is part of that Teton Science Schools Place Network, which the Place Network is an international network of place-based schools. KTS was created as a public charter for grades 7 through 12 and is an alternative option for students seeking a different model of learning rather than a traditional junior or senior high school. As a public charter, that means that the school is totally free for students. Now, interestingly, KTS is housed on the site of a farm, which was donated to the school district to create space for environmental and experiential learning. And with that charge to connect students to nature and to encourage their active leadership, KTS opted to follow the Teton Science Schools model to provide students a project-based learning experience that engages each of those 6 principles of place-based education I discussed earlier. Ada is an 11th grade student at KTS, and she says that the school gives me freedom to learn in a way that works best for me, and I learn better if I'm passionate about doing something. Day to day, I do a lot of research projects, and soon I hope to teach chemistry to the middle school students. Now, while working with farm animals, working in the garden, and going to the nearby woods are something that most of the students at KTS do, the place-based and project-based methods of the school allow students really to do many things, from working with scientists to analyze invasive species, working with conservation officers to understand wildlife protection, even to meeting professionals in Cambridge, the town itself, to learn more about small engines, construction, and even the region's trademark pottery. Now, a teacher at the school shared with us that we're giving them, a student, an opportunity to learn about everything they need to learn about for different career paths. We work with pre-apprenticeships and give them options to take local college courses to get started early. That's what our students would really say they love most about our school. Now, a second case I'd like to talk about that similarly seeks to engage students in this project-based and place-based format is Bellevue Big in Bellevue, Iowa. Now, rather than a separate school itself, Bellevue Big is a program within the Bellevue High School that students can take as a class. In this class, students work with teachers to design and create a community engagement project. The inspiration for Bellevue Big began when the community of Bellevue itself wanted to revitalize the town. The local school was invited to participate as a key institution in the town's future prosperity. And it was determined that generating opportunities for students to become engaged with their hometown and to co-create opportunities for the town's continued growth would be beneficial to student achievement. So as a result, the high school instituted the Bellevue Big program to allow students to do their own community engagement projects. When we visited the school late last year, a variety of projects students were leading ranged from creating signs for local businesses to renovating spaces in the building for public use and even organizing a local arts fair. When we asked about how teachers educate in that type of environment, one of the lead teachers of the program shared that we talk about doing this program like receiving a scholarship. Everybody's going to have somewhat good grades and good test scores. This is the kind of activity that separates you from other kids. Even if you don't have good grades or good test scores, you can say, I led this project. I involved the community, I had to communicate with people, I had deadlines, and here's my end product. It shows that you're capable of doing stuff. I think there's an interest from us, the teachers, to try to do things differently and to prove that you can do them differently. So these first two examples have really underscored the power and impact of place-based education and project-based methods and that student-to-teacher leadership in the community. But my third example here is by teacher Heather Wright in Sylvan, North Carolina. Now, Heather is a high school English teacher and applied for one of our grants to run a project allowing her students to explore their rural and Appalachian regional identities. So her project really explores that narrative-changing aspect that I discussed earlier. Often, rural students are faced daily with media telling them that their rural identity is backwards, that it's wrong, or that it's outright detrimental to their future growth. So hoping to combat that and inspire students through their identity to become engaged citizens, Heather had students create stories about the place that they're from. They did this by researching some noteworthy element about their home, like a famous figure, a legend, a folk song, or even an important business or industry. And then afterwards, students wrote their stories, they illustrated them, and they presented them to elementary school students and began to educate the younger students about the importance of their rural and Appalachian identities. Finally, Heather and her students also researched to find more place-based, rural-focused, and southern United States-focused children's literature. They then bought those books for the local school libraries in the region. Now, similarly, another recipient of the same grant that we offered to Heather, showing the wide-ranging diversity of these types of projects, is a wildfire prevention project by Camille Dudry and Dylan Baer from Pinedale, Wyoming. Now, if you don't know, wildfires are a devastating natural disaster in the western United States every year. In the accumulation of fuel, meaning dead plants, leaves, and sticks, caused by the ongoing drought in the region, has led to massive fires that honestly have wiped out entire communities. So seeing this threat to their own town and wanting students to learn more about the science of fires and even the profession of firefighting, Camille and Dylan designed a project that gave students the freedom to structure freely and investigate this issue. In the classroom, students use probability and statistics to conduct an analysis on fuel reduction, including which fuels cause greater risk for severe fires, what can be done to reduce the risk of severe fires, and whether the resources and labor required for fuel reduction is as effective of a practice as using the same resources and labor to simply put out the fires. Once they finished the classroom portion of the project, students then trained as firefighters themselves, went out into the wild backcountry of Wyoming with their teachers and some local guides, and they cleared out this dangerous accumulation of underbrush. By the end, students were able to expand the possibilities of their education by leading their own research into a community problem, by seeking out experts to learn from in the community, and by actively applying their knowledge and training to resolve the issue. Now, the last case study that I want to bring to you all today is the University Charter School in Livingston, Alabama. And it truly encompasses the goals and lessons of these other four cases and so much more. The school itself was forged out of the strong rural-focused programming launched by the University of West Alabama's College of Education and their Center for Rural Education. Educating students of all ages from kindergarten through 12th grade, the University Charter School integrates place-based and project-based methodology into the instruction in school from the very start. By the time students are in high school, this allows them to participate in projects like Wisdom Writers, where students discuss and bring awareness to their mental health struggles. They also have revived a community garden, which, along with producing produce for the community, shares healthy recipes, and even creating a public service announcement for the community about water safety, which they did in partnership with a local government agency. Through classroom content and projects, teachers at the school encourage students to collaborate with key stakeholders in the community. They cultivate independent thought, and they promote the building of character and civic responsibility. The University Charter School accomplishes these innovative aspects through their course offerings, which are advanced and distinctive for any school, honestly, and in particular a rural school. So in addition to the usual requirements in math, English, social studies, and science, the University Charter School's project and place-based perspective introduces a number of one-of-a-kind courses as well, like conservation biology and something they call DIVES, D-I-V-E-S, which are student-led community projects. Now, the University Charter School programming also allows students to get a head start on their next steps in life after graduation through both an extensive dual credit relationship with the local university and community colleges, and through 6 secondary pathways programs, which offer career experience in computer science, healthcare, teaching, rural business entrepreneurship, interrelated marketing and communications, and skilled technical trades. Through these courses and so much more, students at the University Charter School undertake a variety of place-based projects like I had just shared. So these case studies put into action the 3 general dimensions of transformative rural work that Rural Schools Collaborative endorses that I shared earlier. For all the variation in how these 5 programs operate, by the end, students and teachers in each of these cases are more engaged with their studies, achieving more academically and professionally than in a traditional school setting, and becoming more active participants in their community's health and prosperity, all while still in school. Now, they did this by embracing the learnings and opportunities of their place, by empowering teachers to act as visionary leaders, and by enabling students to channel their interests and define their own educational pathways. Now, that final point about student autonomy I think is especially noteworthy for today's conversation. Traditionally, students do not have much say in what and how they learn, which, as we all know, creates a number of related achievement and engagement problems I've already talked about today. However, building a system to allow more students choice raises a particular concern in rural schools. What I hope the background, methods, and cases I shared today show is that rural schools can completely transform the way in which they educate while still avoiding the usual barriers to change in schools. Rather than adding new classes, new teachers, and raising the required resources to support each of those, what we ask instead is how teachers can create a classroom environment using what they already have at hand to allow students more freedom to choose an individualized education pathway. Now, we do that first by uplifting and empowering rural teachers to be able to lead a more open and individualized classroom setting. And directly related to that, secondly, is implementing a place-based and project-based curriculum. With just those 2 elements, what we find is that teachers are freed from the resource and curricular limitations of a classroom setting, and in turn, which allows students to pursue any interests with their teacher acting as a guide and fellow learner on any of the topics that students desire. For example, Bellevue Big, the second case I mentioned, allows students to pursue any subject that they want. Often, the lead teachers have absolutely no experience with the project students want to do. So to resolve this, the BIG program was designed to allow students and teachers to investigate the topic on their own during class time. If needed, the school could make small investments into tools or books. But more often the case is that students and teachers use the limitless wealth of knowledge from the internet, local libraries, and community experts to teach. A teacher at Bellevue Big told us of 2 projects in particular along these lines. In one, a group of students were interested in studying global cuisines. Now, the teacher had absolutely no experience in this field, but because the BIG program was designed to allow students the freedom to pursue those interests, incorporating each of those 6 principles of place-based education I already talked about, the teacher worked with students to learn all about the topic, and then they finished their studies by learning how to build a pizza oven. In a second example from Bellevue Big, another group of students were interested in learning about aquaculture and the biology of the Mississippi River, which flows right outside their classroom window. Again, the teacher had no or limited knowledge about the subject, and so they studied the topic in an interdisciplinary way. They then led a project to create a fish farm in an aquaponics system within the school itself. In both of these cases from Bellevue Big, the school had no global culture or river biology classes whatsoever, nor could they regularly afford to offer such a class. Instead, they created a program which allows students to freely pursue their interests through research and projects. Teachers then act as both guides and fellow lead learners. Student learning in this environment was achieved through their own research and the general guidance of their teacher, and by learning from the opportunities and experts in their community. In each of the other 4 cases I mentioned in today's presentation, they all follow this exact same method, albeit implemented in different ways for the local context, but they all achieved the same result: student autonomy of choice within a place-based setting under the guidance of a visionary, empowered teacher. Now, once again, I just want to thank you so much for having me today. If you'd like to learn more, I've shared a digital handout with the event organizers, and please feel free to email me anytime at the address I've provided here on the screen. I wish you all a very pleasant day.